Uh, good morning, students. That's evening for me, but morning for you, probably if you're going to listen to this in the morning. But I'm preparing this video for you guys for the class in the morning, and I'd like to go over the IDs. So this will be a direct preparation for your final exam, which will happen on May the 12th. That's, let me check the calendar. That's on Tuesday. So, a couple of days left. And so this video should be coming in the nick of time. Okay, I reduced a little bit the number of IDs right now. They're down to 25 instead of 29 that we had before. So, here we are. Let's go through one by one. Number one, Saint Athanasius of Alexandria. Very important because he was the writer of the Athanasian Creed, the creed that is still used in churches all over the place. And he was prominent during the First Council of Nicaea, that happened in the reign of Constantine, and which defined Jesus as the Son of God and not something less than that. So that would be Saint Athanasius. Probably one of the persons who most responsible for the formulation of the Christian church and the Christian doctrine that this person, Jesus, who lived in Palestine and so on and so forth, was the Son of God. Anyways, that's Saint Athanasius of Alexandria. Number two, Saint Benedict of Nursia is the founder of Western monasticism. Nursia is in southern Italy. He and Pope Gregory the Great, number three, are sort of rough contemporaries. That's so that they belong to the period after the fall of the Roman Empire, after the Germanic invasions of the Roman Empire and the chaotic period in the Roman history. And in that time period, Saint Benedict, following the early examples of monasticism from Egypt, established Western monasticism in the monastery of Monte Cassino and couple of others that he founded there in the vicinity of Naples, and he's the founder of the order of Benedictine monks who still exist today. So these Benedictine monks spread the literacy, spread the Roman culture throughout Europe, converted Europe to the Christian faith, and thus contributed to the continuation of Western civilization after the fall of the Roman Empire. Pope Gregory the Great, number three, is the great pope, one of the great medieval popes. He was a little younger than Saint Benedict of Nursia, but he was the one who actually took these Benedictine monks and sent them all over Europe to go and convert those crazy Germans to Christianity. So he's also famous for Gregorian chant, which is a kind of music still used in the in the Catholic Church. Anyways, that's about it. Number four, we have Empress Theodora. Empress Theodora was the wife of Emperor Justinian. Emperor Justinian and Theodora are important because of their attempt after the Germanic invasions in the 4th and the 5th centuries that brought down the Roman Empire, that they tried to revive the Roman Empire from the new capital of Constantinople in the east, the city of Constantine. And that's why Theodora and Justinians are important for Western civilization. She's also important from the point of view of women's issues because she was a bit of a how shall I put it? Well, they call it actress at the time, but the common rumor was that she was a prostitute actually, and then became empress. So that's another interesting tidbit. Anyways, number 5, we have Ali, the fourth caliph. We didn't talk too much about Islam because this is a course on Western civilization, but Islam as a rival of Western civilization is an important part of this course. So Ali, let's start with the beginning. Caliph is successor of Muhammad. And the leader of the faithful, thus like Muhammad was. Muhammad was both the secular and the military leader of Islamic community. In Islam, there is no separation between the secular and the religious. They're one at the same, at least in this time period. So caliphs are sort of Islamic equivalent of the popes and emperors in one person. And Ali was the fourth caliph. It's one of the 4 rightly guided caliphs. He's one of the 4 rightly guided caliphs. I don't want to bother you with, 3 others. The main issue there is that Ali is the cause of separation between the Sunni and the Shia Muslims. The Sunni Muslims follow the 4 rightly guided caliphs. The Shia Muslims believe that Ali should have succeeded Muhammad immediately and not the second and the third guy before him. So the first, second, third, and fourth before him. First, second, and third, right, before Ali. So this is the separation between the Sunni and the Shia Muslims. Ali was a cousin of Muhammad. He was married to his daughter, and therefore they thought that through the family line, the Shiites, Ali should have succeeded Muhammad, whereas the Sunni Muslim believed that the succession as it happened in reality is the right one. So that's, just Ali is there to make you aware that there is a difference between the Sunni Muslims, like in Saudi Arabia, in Egypt, in Turkey, in other places, and the Shia Muslims, like in parts of Iraq and Iran, and so on and so forth. Anyways, number 6, we have Saint Boniface. Very simple. He goes with Saint Benedict and Pope Gregory. He's one of those people who was sent to convert the Germans to Christianity, and he famously chopped off the oak tree dedicated to the high German god Thor. Enough about Saint Boniface. That's about it. We have Saint Thomas Aquinas. Is the greatest of medieval church Christian thinkers. He especially worked on the synthesis of bringing together the teaching of Aristotle and the teaching of Christian church, which he marvelously put together to such an extent that he is often considered the last of the great church thinkers, what are called the church fathers. And for centuries it was assumed in the Catholic Church that you don't really have to read any of the fathers before Thomas Aquinas, any of the teachers before Thomas Aquinas. Aquinas summarized everything in his Summa, the summary of theology. So Thomas Aquinas, a great philosopher and theologian, a Dominican monk, and somebody who brought together the teaching of Aristotle with Christianity. Number 8, Pope Gregory the Great is Pope Gregory the Seventh. Pope Gregory the Seventh is associated with investiture controversy in the Middle Ages. That's a controversy between the secular and the religious authorities, the popes and the emperors, about who's gonna run the church. Is the church going to be like an institution in the kingdom, where the secular rulers, kings, rule over the church, or the Pope is going to have autonomy and jurisdiction over the church laws and regulations. Pope Gregory then came into conflict with the German Emperor Henry IV and excommunicated him, forced him to repent and beg Pope's forgiveness for being too eager to gain a lot of power over the church. That's about it. What we'll do for IDs. Number 9, we have Saint Joan of Arc, which is has to do with the late Middle Ages. She was a French patriot who, in the worst part of the 100 Years' War between England and France, became a rallying point for the French to push the English back outside of France, to crown Charles, the King of France, in the Reims Cathedral, and finally she was successful. The English were pushed out of Paris, but she was captured and burnt on the stake in the northern French city of Rouen, which was still in Normandy under the English control. So anyways, the English kind of put her on trial for heresy and burned her on the stake. We have St. Thomas Aquinas once again, and I'm going to actually delete that, but not now, after I finish the video. So we have one last guy. Number 11, we have Don Pelayo of Asturias. He's actually not mentioned in the book, but I think of him as very important. It has to do with the history of Spain and Europe in a general sense. As if you remember, Spain was conquered by Muslims in 711, coming from North Africa and crossing over into Spain. And they conquered the whole of Spain except the northernmost territory that was called Asturias. And there in Asturias, this gentleman, who considered himself one of the descendants of the King of Spain, what is called the Visigoth Kings of Spain, but let's try not to make it too complicated. So he was descendants of the King of Spain who were defeated by the Arabs. And he starts rebellion against the Muslim invaders in Spain, and that rebellion is called the Reconquest, or in Spanish, Reconquista. And it's really a sort of a first crusading war to kick Muslims out of the domain of Western civilization. And this is what Don Pelayo started in the 8th century, and this is why he's important. Traditionally, actually, because of this, because the starting point of the Spanish state, the Spanish kingdom, is this Principality of Asturias in the north. Thus, always the heir to the throne of Spain always has the title of Prince of Asturias, or today I think it's a lady, a woman who is Infanta Sofia, right? Sofia, and she's Princess of Asturias. She's the one next in line to become king or queen in her case. All right, enough about Don Pelayo. We have number 12, St. Francis of Assisi in Italy. He was an example of what is called a new kind of spirituality that emerged in the later Middle Ages. City spirituality. We have the new kind of monks. We had before Benedictine monks who were basically, trying to run away from the world and hide in the mountains, go in the remote areas, live in the caves, and build their monasteries there and live isolated. These new kind of monks, one of the first of them was, Saint Francis, were the monks who were actually city people. They were called mendicant monks because they were beggars. Mendicant means to beg, and they were city monks who went around preaching and asking for contributions. So, anyways, this is Saint Francis, important for his attitude towards nature. Even today, on the feast day of Saint Francis, people bring their pets to the church to be blessed and things of that sort. Anyways, that's enough about Saint Francis. That's about it. We have number 13, Francesco Petrarca, very important for your essay. Humanism, Renaissance humanism. Francesco Petrarca was the founder of Renaissance humanism. He was a poet, a first poet to get a laurel leaf, be crowned with a laurel crown, which was an ancient Roman custom, and Petrarca was the first person in the New Age, after the fall of the Roman Empire, to receive the laurel of the poet laureate, right? Francesco Petrarca and his poems, dedicated for the most part to Laura, an ideal woman who Petrarca met and idealized in his poetry. Okay, enough about that. Number 14, Filippo Brunelleschi is the founder of Renaissance architecture. He was given the task to build the dome of the Florence Cathedral, and thus was instrumental in bringing back the Roman tradition of dome building to Europe, to Western civilization. Anyways, that'd be enough, right? Number 15, we have Dante Alighieri, Grandpadre Dante. Dante was considered, in Italy they call him Grandpadre Dante, the father of Italian culture and Italian literature. In particular, he was a little older than Petrarca, but he was the first poet to write in Italian, not in Latin. Even though Italian is really a dialect of Latin. It comes from Latin language, but the Italians still, at that time, had difficulties understanding the old Roman Latin. So Dante started writing in Italian. His most important work was La Divina Commedia, or Divine Comedy, which is really an illustration of the theology of St. Thomas Aquinas through poetry. That's sort of a quick summary of what is the Divine Comedy about. It has 3 parts: hell, purgatory, and heaven. And anyways, also another example of what we call classical Renaissance humanism, right? Renaissance humanism, for example, it's the Roman poet Virgil who takes Dante through hell and shows him around the suffering of the damned over there. Anyways, Dante Alighieri. Sandro Botticelli was a poet, was a painter. Was a painter from Florence, who painted beautiful paintings, allegorical paintings, right? They are beautiful, but there is a hidden meaning behind all the beauty in Botticelli's paintings. He was very much influenced by Platonic philosophy, and thus, took these paintings in a typical Platonic sense that, things here on earth symbolize, they point to higher reality. That's a typical Platonist move that Botticelli espoused in his painting. He's famous for being part of this Renaissance humanist circle in Florence. And then he got under the influence of a reformer, Girolamo Savonarola, which is down the line, 21st, down the line. And Girolamo Savonarola was a Dominican friar, and he thought that this Renaissance humanism is just a waste of time, sinful waste of time, and he eventually convinced Botticelli to give up the painting and to devote himself to religion. Number 17, we have Nicolas Gombert. He was a musician, Renaissance musician. Renaissance music is, we listen to it in class. It's very different from what was going on before. The way they called it, the Petrarca called this Christian humanist style, dolce stil nuovo, sweet new style, and you hear this sweetness in the music of Nicolas Gombert. He was a composer, a musician at the court of Charles V, who is also part of our IDs, and we'll talk about him more. He was actually from the area of Netherlands, right? Flanders, we call it also Flanders. Okay, number 18, we have Miguel de Cervantes, the author of immortal character in the Spanish and world literature, Don Quixote. Don Quixote. Well, you have here Don Quixote on my wall. Oops, sorry. There, with his faithful companion, Sancho Panza. So, Don Quixote is the most famous novel in Spanish literature. It's about this knight, Don Quixote, who is unhappy with the modern world, which is completely dedicated to the pursuit of money, career, and other material things, and he wants to make a stand for chivalry, and of course it doesn't go well, but that's what Cervantes wanted to say. Anyways, Cervantes, the greatest poet of the Spanish language, and he's Don Quixote. Number 19, we have Desiderius Erasmus, another example of Christian humanism in the north, this time in the north, in Flanders, in Netherlands, famous for his translations of the Bible from Greek, and his work on the Bible, original manuscript on the Bible in general, and later on came into conflict with Martin Luther over in which direction the church should be reformed. One direction was this direction of Christian humanism that is outlined by people like Petrarch and Erasmus and many others, and the other one was a more puritanical direction that was envisioned by Calvin and Luther. Anyways, we have here number 20, Catherine of Aragon. Catherine of Aragon is very important, and it's very important to know her family connections, because to understand that time period in history, it's enough just to know who Catherine of Aragon was. So she was a daughter of Isabel of Castilla, Isabel la Católica, the lady who patronized Columbus. She was then a sister of Juana la Loca, and Juana la Loca is the one who gave birth to Charles V. Who is also part of this IDs. Catherine of Aragon married Henry VIII and gave him a daughter, but he wanted a son, the daughter Mary, but he wanted a son, and therefore he divorced her and married a Protestant woman, Anne Boleyn, and turned England into a Protestant country, to a great disappointment of Catherine and her daughter Mary. So that's the story about the Reformation and personalities involved in there and so on and so forth, and the story of divorce of Henry VIII, but that's Catherine of Aragon. Number 21, we have Girolamo Savonarola. He goes together with Botticelli, so it will be one or the other on the exam. I won't give you both because you basically read the same things about them. And he was a preacher in Florence, one of the precursors of the Reformation, who thought that this Christian humanism that was advocated by people like Sandro Botticelli and others in Florence was a sinful way of doing things. And he wanted to purify the church and get rid of these what he thought were the pagan influences onto Christianity. And eventually he was rejected in Florence, burned on the stake. But anyways, that's another. That's your Girolamo Savonarola. Okay, we have number 22, Ignatius of Loyola. Another Spanish saint of what is called the Counter-Reformation, the Catholic response to the Reformation. And somebody who established a new kind of spirituality, a more introspect look at the spirituality. This is generally the move of the Reformation, either Catholic or Protestant. But in case of Ignatius Loyola, he's famous for his spiritual exercises in which lay people, but you often, most commonly the followers of Loyola, Jesuits, Society of Jesus, they organize this reading of the spiritual exercises when you kind of meditate and focus to figure out what is the purpose of God for your life. And that's a new kind of spirituality that emerges during the Reformation, where ritual is no longer as important as it was before, but you kind of focus on your inner spiritual life. Anyways, that's about Loyola. We have another one of these reformers, 23, John Calvin, who in many ways is similar to Loyola. His theology is a bit different. He's the founder of Puritanism, of Calvinism, of the Presbyterian Church, native of France, so it's actually not John, he's Jean Calvin. But anyways, John Calvin for us here, who created a theocratic society in his adopted city of Geneva in Switzerland. Theocracy is the rule by priests, and that's what Calvin organized in Geneva. He was also a believer in what is called the predestination, and that's also a shift in spirituality that occurred around the times of Reformation, that basically some people are saved and some people are damned, and this is determined by God without any how should I put it, without regard to any good works that we might have. It's just this was decreed by God before the beginning of time, that some of these will be saved and they will be damned, and there's nothing you can do about it. So what you can do actually in terms of religious practice of Calvinism, you can then try to figure out if you are among the elect. And surprise, surprise, most of Calvinists figure out that they were actually among the elect. So anyways, that's about Calvinism. number 23. Number 24, we have, let's do number 25 first. Charles V of Carlos I. He's emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, and as such he was known as Charles V, but he was also king of Spain before he became emperor, and that there in Spain he was known as Carlos I, which is the same name, Charles, Carlos, that's, the same name. But that's why he comes with two different numbers, Charles V and Carlos I in Spain. He is important for as an emperor who had a good chance of uniting the whole of Europe under his rule. He failed because of the Reformation, and he is famous for his meeting council of Worms, where he in the German city of Worms, where he actually condemned Martin Luther for his teachings. He's also famous for standing up to the Turkish invasion of Europe under the Turkish Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent. So, finally we have number 24, Hernan Cortés, one of the conquerors of Mexico. Cortés was a Spaniard who came with Columbus to the Caribbean, and from Cuba. Then he actually, with some renegade soldiers, organized a landing in Veracruz in Mexico, and from there they climbed the mountains of central Mexico all the way to the Aztec capital Tenochtitlan, today Mexico City, where they conquered the Aztecs. They conquered the Aztec emperor, killed him, and established the Spanish rule in Mexico. So in Spain, these people are called conquistadores, or the winners, the conquerors, and Cortés is the guy who conquered Mexico. So that's about it for your IDs. All right, best of luck on the final.